Today we're going to be talking about how we become our best self in these upcoming months. Before I begin, I would like to say that, all of us have been going through a sort of difficult experience these days. There's so many things that we've had to contend with, so many winds of change, I would say, that we've had to sort of be blown up against, and we've had to change our life, change the way we worked, change the way we entertained ourselves, change the way we taught our children. And imagine that these are all winds of change that are blowing and that we are up against. And then we also have, obviously, the forces that are internal inside of us. And more recently, something that I have noticed is actually an anticipatory grief. There's a lot of sadness and maybe even like a lull that I'm seeing in people that, first we were sort of moving through, we had a lot of adrenaline, we were going to do this and we were going to fix that and we were going to teach our children, and there was a lot of that going on inside of us. However, as the time went on, and I think maybe 3 weeks in or 4 weeks in now, people are starting to feel really tired. They're starting to feel like, maybe I'm not cut out for this, that these storms are way too big for me. And that feeling, that low feeling, that sadness is actually a grief that we might be experiencing, because as we think ahead, there's many of us who are going to be observing Ramadan. There's many of us who are thinking, well, this is when I used to make my plans for what we were going to do in the summer. And there's many people that have their children graduating from high school that won't be able to sort of see them march in the graduation ceremony, or maybe they won't be able to go to prom or any of these other activities that happen at the end of the school year. And that is just a lot of sadness that people are feeling. And anticipatory grief is actually grief that is experienced prior to the loss. So the loss is coming, the way we sort of thought about Ramadan, about, and whether or not you observed Ramadan or not, Ramadan in the UAE is very much associated with connection and going out and being with your friends and being with your family and spending these evenings together. I think that is something that all of us are saying, well, this is going to be very different and this is going to be very hard. And so I want to put a little bit of perspective. First naming some of these feelings, but then putting a little bit of perspective about how do you sort of process some of this. And maybe give you a little bit of a metaphor, okay? So stay with me as I ask you to imagine yourself. I want you to imagine that you are a boat in the middle of the sea. It's a sailboat, and you are the sailor, or you are the boat, and it's a sailboat. And anytime the wind blows, we sort of go along with it. And sometimes there's gusts of wind that come, like a windstorm that might come. And the COVID pandemic was like a windstorm. But anytime there's maybe a death in your family, or, some other sort of traumatic event that has happened within your family or your life, you can imagine that that's a gust, a windstorm. People that might have lost their job, or people that are away from their loved ones, or maybe their loved ones have been sort of affected by this quite seriously. Imagine that to be a windstorm. Now there is a sailboat in the middle of the sea, and here's all these winds sort of blowing, right? And I want you to think about your life as having tailwinds and headwinds. Obviously, tailwinds are going to be people that are there for you, your family, your support network, your internal strength and your resiliency. This is your tailwind. These are the winds that are going to push you in the direction that you want to go. And then there's the headwinds that we're sort of up against, and the world is full of headwinds. And it could be a boss that you sort of don't get on with. It could be a family member that sort of you have a negative relationship with. It could be friends that you miss and that's a headwind. But internally, there's also a lot of headwinds, right? We have bad habits that we sort of are contending with, almost the nafs, as we say, right? We're up against this, ego is up against this, this fight. There's a part of us that's good, and then there's a part of us that feels like it's lazy and it's got bad habits, it's constantly distracted. Even the world full of distractions is actually a headwind if we think about ourselves being a sailor in the middle of the ocean trying to get to a place, right? So I want you to think about all of these winds inside of us and outside of us that are actually taking place, and that life is full of these kinds of winds. You'll never have a period where it will be completely steady. It will be calm seas. Sometimes the seas are calm and the winds are calm, but you still need to be moving in the direction you want, right? And so at that time, you might need to take out your paddles and you might need to be a lot more resourceful. However, most of the time we're going to be contending with some of these winds, whether they're pushing us or then whether they're up against us. We're going to be contending with something inside of us. And so I want you to think about people and, people having different levels of being able to harness the energy of the wind. Now, when you think about wind, it's energy, right? We have energy fields, wind fields that are actually fixing this energy. Emotions are energy. And if we know how to harness these emotions, there are many times that people have been in a complete state of grief, but they were able to harness the grief and they were able to create an organization for their, the one who had passed. Or they were able to create a movement for something that has passed. There's people that are harnessing the energy of loneliness and saying, well, you know what, I'm going to do something about this, and saying, I'm going to go out and I'm going to connect. Or maybe they created a volunteer organization. So energy in motion, emotion, is the same thing as this metaphor of winds. And I'm going to constantly be coming back to this metaphor. And within this life metaphor, I want you to think about being on a scale. We have the drifters in life. They're just moving from place to place, and time to time the winds of change come and they sort of take them in this direction or they take them in that direction. Then we have the people that are the sailors, that are actually moving, harnessing the energy. And then we have the masters. And in the areas of our life, we have drifters, we have sailors who take charge, and then we have masters who really have sort of gotten this thing down. And I want you to think about all areas of your life as, am I being a drifter? Am I being taken by the wind? Am I being taken by, oh, look what COVID is happening to me and I'm completely helpless, and, look all the different things that are happening in my life and I'm completely helpless in the face of all of these? Or are you going to be the one who sort of takes charge and says, what am I going to do about this? And how can I harness? This is not even just about getting through. This is about how can I harness the power of this moment and actually make the most of it. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about. How do we harness the energy of COVID and energy of all the changes that have happened to us, and then move us in the direction of the life that we want, which is to be deeply connected to ourselves and deeply connected to people in our life, to be spiritual, to be physically healthy, to be emotionally balanced. This is what we want, right? And that cannot happen if we are drifting. And drifters, let me tell you what drifters look like these days when it comes times to COVID, right? Drifted are people who feel very, very frazzled by all of this because, oh my God, what other change am I going to have to deal with? And oh no, now I have to sit at Ramadan and I won't be able to go out. And they're constantly in this reactive state. They're constantly feeling bored. What am I supposed to do now? How am I supposed to be productive? How am I supposed to work from home? These are people that are reacting to the change of the wind. They're reacting to their outside environment. Some days are great because the winds are great that day, and some days they're really off, chart, because that's the way the wind sort of blew them, because that's how they were sort of moving along with their emotions. And so I really want you to think about these three realms that I'm going to share with you: physical realm, the emotional realm, and then the spiritual realm. How do we harness the energy of Ramadan? And how do we harness the energy of this COVID indoor experience? Note that I did not say isolation, because none of us are isolated. Look at this. We're all sitting wherever we are in the world and connected to each other in this way. You guys are able to talk to me. I'm able to talk to you. And this is so great. I'm just going to move this along a little bit so I can see the questions. I'm just so happy to be with you all. So let's talk a little bit about some of the basics that we're going to do. And I want you to hold, I would have held a chart up for you guys, but it spells it backwards, so I wasn't able to do that. So I want you to think about drifter. Am I being a drifter right now? Am I floating from day to day, wondering, is it Tuesday? Is it Wednesday? I'm not really sure. Am I being one of those people? Am I being a sailor? Well, I've taken control of my life. And am I being a master sailor? Because even within sailors, there's beginners, and then there's intermediate, and then there's masters. And I want you to sort of think about your life in that way. When it comes to physical, it's the same sort of thing. There's people who are sedentary. They are not moving. Think of this as the couch potato, right? They're not moving at all within their life. So these physical, emotional, and spiritual realm is what I want to share with you on how do you be your best self. And you cannot do it one without the other. You cannot be your best self if you don't have a good physical practice in place. You cannot be your best self if you don't have a good emotional practice in place. You cannot be your best self if you don't have a good spiritual practice in place, whatever that spiritual practice is for you. So I'm going to break it down into these three realms. Now, the physical realm, we have the same three categories. There's one that is the couch potato, sedentary. They're not moving at all. They are the ones who sort of watch the fitness videos. They watch the fitness, social media, and they feel like they got some sort of exercise as a result of it. But they're actually not doing any movement. They're learning a lot. They can tell you every yoga move just, by telling you about it, but they actually are not doing anything. So this is the sedentary person. Then we have the one who is active. This person has said, you know what? I'm going to start moving, and I'm going to start, just even if it's 5 minutes a day, I'm going to start getting in the direction of being a physically fit person, which is the third category. So we have sedentary, we have active, and then we have physically fit. And I want you to think of yourself on this scale. And you won't move from sedentary to physically fit, because this is how most people make their resolutions. They think, oh my God, I'm gonna work out 5 days a week, when they actually haven't, most of the day they're sitting and maybe they get 1,000 steps in. So how can you move in this realm from a physically fit person from a sedentary person to now a physically active person? And that is going to be, I want you to get a baseline. That's first. Again, you cannot be an emotionally and spiritually connected, authentic self if you don't have a physical practice, guys. You have to exercise as if your life depended on it, and as if your mental health depended on it, because in times like this, it really matters. The sailor is not going to be one who doesn't know how to move. He needs to be physically fit as well as emotionally and spiritually sort of regulated, right? And so physical fitness, I want you to get a Fitbit, and I don't get paid to say this, but I really love the Fitbit. The Fitbit is a great way for you to start measuring, how sedentary am I? And if you don't have a Fitbit, you can actually put download the app on your phone, where you can actually count the steps as to how, as long as you have your phone with you, you get a rough estimate as to how physically moving you are, how many steps you actually have. And you will find there are days where I'm like, oh my God, I must have walked 1,000 and 10,000 steps today. But actually it was just that my brain was exhausted. physically, I almost walked 1,800 steps and I wasn't moving at all. So our brains are so exhausted these days because, especially in times of stress, our brain uses more energy. So we think we're physically moving, but we're actually not. We're only just mentally exhausting ourselves. And so I want you to think about getting some sort of baseline and then moving slowly up from that place. So a personal story where for those of you who don't know me, I have 4 children, and every single time after my children, I would actually say, okay, now I got to start moving again in the way I used to move, right? And I couldn't get myself to do the 1-hour exercise every day. So what did I do? I started just doing 7 minutes. And so move from sedentary to 7 minutes, and then I went to 8 minutes, and then I went to 9 minutes, and then I went to 10, and then I moved from 20 to 30 to 40 to 50, and that's kind of how I moved. The next thing I knew, I was actually working out for 80 minutes a day, and I didn't even realize that. And so I want you to think about moving physically in that direction. That's one thing I'm going to ask you to do. I also would suggest that you pick an hour of the day and make it first thing in the morning, or for people that are observing Ramadan, you can actually do it before you break your fast. You can just go for a brisk walk where you can actually get your exercise and then sit down to eat. And for those of you who are fasting, do not think that you don't have energy during Ramadan. Yes, you are supposed to be conserving some of that energy for other things, which I will be speaking about now. But 40% of our body's energy goes into digesting food. And so even a lot of these healing sort of places you go to, detox places, why do they do juicing? They do juicing because your body spends a lot of energy digesting food. And so I want you to know that in Ramadan, you might be detoxing in the first week. So food and sugar and all of that we're sort of detoxing from. However, if you play this thing right, there's a whole movement about intermittent fasting and all of this stuff because it actually gives you more energy. So no, you don't have an excuse not to move in Ramadan. You actually are going to have to harness the energy of that, all the energy that you have, and then make sure that you do a brisk walk an hour or 2 before you break your fast, come in and then do it that way. So that's something I want you to think about. Now I want to spend a little bit of time talking about harnessing the energy of the winds of COVID and the winds of change, the winds of being indoors, and how different that this Ramadan is going to be. And this, before, there's many of us that used to go out and they used to pray in mosques and they used to go to iftars and they used to have iftars in their home with other family and friends. And this Ramadan will be different. And how do we harness the energy of that? Because I'm sure that we will never have a Ramadan like this again. I'm just sure of it, because we have never had anything like this happen to us before, and we will never have anything like this happen to us again. So I want you to think about 2 words, and that's solitude and stillness, within the realms of emotional and spiritual. Remember, I've already talked about physical, and now I want to talk about your emotional and spiritual. This is truly about getting in connection with yourself. And this is about adopting new habits, new ways of being. So if I talk about the same category, and we talk about the emotional health, so there's the drifters in the emotional space, and these are extremely reactive person. That you say something to me and I react, and you say something to me and I react. And that's because I'm reacting to the change. So it's a very highly reactive person. Then we have the person who is attuned. They're attuned to you, they're attuned to themselves, they're connected with themselves, and that's a person who's now starting to take control of their emotions. They're realizing that there's a whole bunch of energy here that I can do something with. But first they have to tune into that. And then we have obviously the emotionally intelligent people. And the emotionally intelligent people are able to harness the energy inside of them as well as outside of them of emotions. And there's a whole lot I can say about emotions. But one thing I would recommend is that when we are in a place of solitude and not in a place of isolation. Now, what am I talking about here? So a lot of what I'm hearing in social media these days is be connected, be connected, be connected, because all of a sudden, if you are living alone, you start to feel like, oh my God, maybe there's something bad's gonna happen to me emotionally or mentally. But we have to remember that every great prophet, philosopher, scientist, writer, every great person spent time away from society in solitude. And there's a difference between isolation and solitude. Isolation is something that happens to me. Again, the drifter mentality that, oh my God, look at what's happening to me. I'm not able to go outside. I'm not able to do something. I'm not able to be, in the mosque. All of this stuff that I'm hearing is the language of isolation and the mindset of isolation. But if I take charge of this period of being alone, and I say this is an invitation for me to have an inner experience, an experience like I will never have before. And so many of us, by the way, at least the ones that are observing Ramadan, used to say that, my God, it's so hectic. I have to go from here, I have to do this, I have to go do that. And all of a sudden we felt like we were not spending it in the way we wanted it to be, because something intuitively was telling us that we needed more stillness and we needed more solitude in our life. And so the prophet used to go out into the cave to have his revelations. Nietzsche went out into his cabin or into his attic to have his revelations. Churchill used to go out into his barn and where he used to do painting and have his revelations. Everybody disconnected from society for a period of time where they went and had their revelation. So how can you harness the power of this quiet period, of this stillness, of this indoor experience, and use it to get connected with yourself? Now, what do I mean by connected with yourself? I want you to be attuned to your emotions. And by that, I mean listen to your voice inside. Is it highly critical? Is it soothing? Is it comforting? A lot of us have internalized a very critical person inside of us. And that's the person that actually comes in and starts talking to us. And if we don't do something right, it's a very critical person. Are you speaking to yourself with a voice of compassion? Are you able to listen to the thoughts inside of you, or are they just so overwhelming? And that's why you constantly find yourself on social media, or you find yourself distracted and busy with something else. I actually call it compulsively connected or pathologically productive, because if you can say, well, no, I don't do social media, I actually work and I'm being very productive right now. That's the same thing, because if you are being pathologically productive, it is actually a numbing moment or numbing exercise that you're engaged in. Because a lot of times people actually use work to get a sense of control in their life. And it's called workaholic because it actually is addictive, because we feel we're in control of that period and we don't actually want to numb out our feelings. So we fill ourselves with work. Don't do that. Don't make yourself pathologically productive. Don't sign on for too many online courses and, take all of this, read every book. And, some of the people that were so purists about solitude, some philosophers would not even, and obviously the prophets, they were all herders, right? Some of the prophets that were herders, they would go out into the silence. There were no books. There were no social media. There was nothing. They would sit in silence, because then they would hear their voice. They would hear their thoughts. The wisdom is inside of us if we can just silence some of that. I remember there was a period in my life where I really wanted to get really connected to myself. I would wear Bose noise cancellation headsets with like, you know, cotton in my ear, just so I could silence even the shh noise that is around us all the time. So how do I create the stillness? How do I create the silence? How do I embrace the solitude to get connected to myself? Journaling is a great way to do that. And if you are running 200 miles an hour and then you try to sit still, don't do that. You need to ease your way. Remember, if you are a drifter and you're, you know, running rapid in sort of the winds, you don't want to run from that going to, you know, total solitude and total silence. You don't want to do that. You want to move into a place of stillness. One thing I would recommend is to do a puzzle. That's an exercise. It's still mind, but it allows you to sit still. You can't be running around and doing things or doing 5 things while you're building a puzzle. So build a puzzle. Paint, because you can't be running around trying to paint. But don't try to get a perfect painting. It's about the process, not the project. It's the process of being still with something that we are trying to get at. The stiller you are, the more connected you will be to this inner voice inside of you, the spirit of you, the wisdom inside of you. I want you to notice your feelings when you are journaling. What am I feeling right now? And I want you to check in with yourself. I want you to wake up in the morning and say, what am I feeling right now? If I could be a color, what would I be? And don't be a judge, be a scientist, okay? When you're thinking about feelings, I don't want to be like, oh, no, I can't feel bad. Look at, oh, I should say alhamdulillah, or I should say gratitude. No, don't do that to yourself just yet. I will get to gratitude. It's going to be important, but do not deny your feeling, because you need to give yourself permission to feel. And you will not, every time, if a messenger showed up at your door and you said, no, go away. No, go away. No, go away. And our feelings are messengers from beyond. They're from inside of us, telling us something is important to us. The feeling of grief is that something was so important to us that we no longer have. The feeling of anger is that something that we wanted is not happening, right? Something that we passionately believe in is no longer happening, right? And then a feeling of sadness is that something also is at a loss. Or the feeling of gratitude is that something that we want more of. So all feelings are messengers. Do not deny the negative or difficult feelings. I want you to give yourself permission to feel that. I want you to be a little bit of a scientist and be curious about where's that coming from, because you're never going to go from drifter to sailor if you first don't understand the winds. Sailors understand that when the wind comes this way and the wind comes that way, I'm going to need to adjust my sail. You're not going to understand how to do that if you first don't understand your emotions. You need to understand your emotions. First, you got to be curious about them. When do I feel angry? When do I feel sad? When do I feel worried? Why do I feel worried? You know, what kinds of things make me anxious? And then be really curious about your feeling of loneliness. Now, there's a lot of people that are confusing being alone with lonely. And there's a big difference between those two. Be curious about this feeling, because even pre-COVID, I was saying we are in a loneliness epidemic. In the UK, there was a czar for loneliness, right? Because there's people that are lonely. What we try to do is we try to do all kinds of activities to make sure that people don't feel lonely, but that's not going to help you be less lonely. That's going to just help you be distracted. It's going to help you sort of numb out the feeling of loneliness because you're entertained for a while. But true sort of love and connection is the only cure for loneliness. And I believe the people that are able to be alone are the least loneliest. And so how are you going to be alone? And you need to really establish a relationship with yourself. And so some of the things that I've mentioned to you now, I've said stillness and then internal experience. I want you to understand that this is not going to be an easy process, but nothing good comes easy. the road to heaven is paved with hardship. And so if we want an internal heavenly experience, then we are going to go through hardship. If we want to have an internal hellish experience, we are just going to keep moving in the way of pleasure and distraction and numbing and, you know, all of these other things that we do. So the road to internal heaven is paved with difficulty. And that difficulty is going to be, this is very hard for me, but I'm going to sit still and I'm going to work on this puzzle, and I'm going to do it for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to do it for 7 minutes, and then I'm going to do it for 9 minutes, and then you slowly build the muscle. Just like the physically, you know, sedentary person, I'm not going to go to the gym and try to bench press, you know 200 pounds in one go. I'm going to build my muscle slowly. I'm going to start with 5, then I'm going to go to 6, and then I'm going to go to 7. And that's how you build an emotional muscle. Slowly, I want you to build that space. And slowly, I want you to still your life a little bit. And I pray that all of us can harness the energy of this moment of stillness. And I know that somewhere inside of us, all of us are feeling like, you know what? Life was a little bit hectic before this. And all of us are feeling like, I was moving around a little bit too crazy before this, and busy, and not productive at all. And so I want you to still yourself emotionally, be curious about yourself emotionally. Start by writing a journal. Start by looking at your feelings, being curious about your feelings. Download a feelings chart. I'll put something on my Instagram account for a feelings chart on my stories later on, so you guys can check that out. But a feelings chart is a great way for you to get nuanced, because most people just say, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm mad. 3 feelings, most people. And the feelings are so many, because what if I said I'm sad? And what if I said I feel betrayed? Now you really understand the nuance, and they actually call it emotional granularity, that you can understand on a nuanced level that there's something happening here. And I believe we all have that ability, because we all are sensory beings. We're sensory animals. We can sense the environment, and we can sense our emotions if we tune in. But we're not going to tune in if there's that much noise outside of us. And trust me, it ain't going to be easy, because social media is super addictive, and we all are addicted to it on some level if we don't manage that addiction. And so that noise and, oh, let me grab it, oh, let me grab it, oh, let me grab it, is going to be there. So that's your emotional sort of skill building to a place of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is knowing inside of you what is happening on a granular level, being able to communicate that to each other, to another person, and how do I express my emotions? So how do I regulate my emotions is going to be part of emotional intelligence, as well as interpersonal. So I'm able to read what's happening in the other person. If my signal is clear, I'm able to pick up on the other person's signal, and then I'm able to do something with that emotion. That's what emotional intelligence is. Inside of me, regulate. Outside of me, communicate. Okay, so we want to get to that place, but you ain't gonna get to that place unless you still yourself, you understand yourself, you get super curious about your emotions, and you become a scientist about your emotions. Now let's talk a little bit about spirituality. So I talked about physical, I talked about emotional, and now I'm going to talk about spiritual. And this month of Ramadan, and there's a lot of my friends that don't fast, that don't observe Ramadan, but they're going to harness the energy of Ramadan. It's a very spiritual month. And what is the essence of Ramadan, right? The essence of Ramadan is to eliminate distractions so you can have an internal experience of spirituality, right? We stop eating, we stop doing other things. Physically, we're not supposed to be engaging in many different activities. We're not supposed to be smoking. We're not supposed to be doing anything pleasurable, etc. We eliminate the physical distractions so we can have a spiritual experience. The quieter you are. So how do we harness the power of this stillness? That, yeah, okay, fine. We're not having these iftars that we always wanted to go to. And yeah, we're not actually being in the mosque the way we always used to. But there's a power here there's an extreme power of being able to connect to your spirit that you would not be able to do in such environments. So I want you to say, well, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for me. I'm sorry, I'm just going to scroll up and see if there's any questions. And then I'm going to move into the spiritual aspect. So, all right, I don't see any questions. All right, so let's talk about spiritual. So if I'm talking about the drifter, I'm talking about the sailor, and I'm talking about the master. And what are the components in the spiritual realm? We have people that are unconscious. They're lost. The winds of life are blowing them this way and that way. They're very driven by pleasure. They're very sort of reactive to their environment. This feels good, let me do it. This feels good, let me do it. This feels good, let me do it. And that's the spiritually sort of pleasure-seeking, unconscious person. That person is going to feel lost, regardless of any religion that you sort of practice. If you are reactive to your physical pleasures and just sort of going on that, as human beings, we have to remember that we seek pleasure, we avoid pain. That's our programming. Every part of me that's going to have to make an effort, I don't want to do it. And that's why a lot of us wait for life to happen to us. We want someone to take care of us. I don't feel like praying or meditating or any of these other things because they require effort and they require discipline. And that is difficult for people because we seek pleasure. And there's pleasure in watching Netflix all day long and being lazy. I know that it's just momentary pleasure. In the long run, you don't feel very good about yourself, but we are momentary pleasure-seeking people. Know this about your programming. This is not, you're not like a original person here. All human beings on earth are pleasure-seeking and they avoid pain. Now, there's some of us that have moved into a place of practicing. We have a practice of some sort. And that person is going to be now more conscious. We're moving in the direction of consciousness. So there's some people who pray, there's some people who pray before they eat, or there's some people that meditate as part of their practice, and there's some people who have a very disciplined practice about how they engage in some of these things, regardless of whatever your religion is. And I want you to think about practicing wherever you are. So like I said, the Fitbit, you start counting the steps and start from there. I want you to figure out where your baseline is. Don't run out of steam. This whole 30-day experience of Ramadan is supposed to be for you to build some good habits, but don't say, well, I'm going to pray 19 hours a day because that's, it doesn't work like that. It needs to be sustainable. So where are you now, and how can you slowly build up a muscle of spirituality? And so when I first started practicing, my sister, Saliha Afridi, who also works at the Lighthouse, and she teaches meditation, and she can meditate and pray and for hours and hours and hours. And as you probably can imagine, that I'm a hyperactive person, and for me to sit still was extremely hard. And so I told her, okay, please tell me how to meditate, because when I feel like I'm gonna sit still, I feel like I'm gonna throw up, because there's so much energy inside of me that I can't sit still for too long. And my voice, the noise in my head, and there's so many thoughts, and I can't still myself. She said, do it for 10 seconds. So spirituality muscle, guys, do it for 10 seconds. We need a physical muscle, we need an emotional muscle, we need a spiritual muscle. And I want you to do it for 10 seconds. Whatever it is that you do, just do it for 10 seconds. Or do it for one prayer. Or then do it for another. And then slowly from 10 seconds, I moved to 20, and then I moved to 30 seconds, to a minute, to 5, and on and on. And so I want you to build small micro habits, because we really set ourselves up for failure. And when we make a goal and we don't show up for that goal, we lose faith in ourselves. We lose trust in ourselves, because I said I was going to show up at 9 a.m. And then when I went there was nobody there at 9 a.m.? How would you feel if a friend told you, I'll be there at 9 a.m. and every day she told you she was going to be there at 9 a.m. and she never showed up? You would lose faith in that friend. You would lose trust in that friend. And that's the relationship you have with yourself. I will never make a promise to myself that I cannot keep. So I keep my promises very small. So I can do 10 seconds and I just, feel very good about that. And then I move from there, minute by minute. And everything in my life that I have done, and I know that the top performers in the world, whether they're CEOs or whether they're gurus or whoever they are, moms that have really got it right, they did little by little. They actually didn't try to do everything all at once. And so I want you to do little by little of spiritual practice. And that is under the umbrella of this COVID solitude. So we're going to call it COVID solitude and not COVID isolation. It's called self-solitude. And it is the basis of that is, the essence of what we're trying to do is self-strengthening. So how can we self-strengthen during this upcoming 30 days? And how can we practice each day all of these values that we have? So for example, spirituality is about values, right? Generosity, connection, forgiveness, kindness, right? It's about these things. So if you're not a very generous person, there's a great book called Purification of the Heart. It actually tells you if you're not a generous person, go force yourself to do something generous and give and give and give until that becomes the new way. Because we know from neuroscience that the neurons that fire together wire together, and there is neurons probably inside of our heart of generosity, and the more you practice something, the more you become that something. It is not just the idea of generosity. It's not just the idea of kindness. I want you to do something about it. I want you to say, I am going to do 2 acts of kindness every day, and then write down those 2 acts. I want, Benjamin Franklin used to carry a little pocket book, and in his book, I have a little book myself, but I think it's in my bag, but it's a little book that fits in the back of your pocket. And he used to write down all of these different values that he wanted to grow, right? He had frugality, so he didn't want to spend a lot of money. And he had kindness, and he had honesty and courage. And then he would every day write down how many acts of courage he did. So in that moment, he became super conscious. And this is how you practice. You build the muscle of courage. Courage doesn't just show up. Slowly you take a small risk, and then you take a bigger risk, and then you take a bigger risk, and then you develop the muscle of courage. So kindness is the same thing. Forgiveness is the same thing. Who are the people in your life that you need to be forgiving right now? Because forgiveness doesn't just hurt you. It doesn't just hurt them. It actually doesn't hurt them at all. It hurts you. I'm not sure who said this, but they said, holding on to revenge or anger or resentment is like holding on to a burning coal, thinking you're going to throw it at someone, but in the end, it ends up burning you. So how can I do small acts of forgiveness? How can I just make the intention to forgive people? Because remember, there's a difference between forgiveness and healing. There's a lot of us that are fighting. Oh, I'm not going to forgive this person. That person is sleeping fine in their bed. They don't care, right? They've gone on with their life. You are the one burning up. And so how can you cool and calm and, sort of cool that hellish experience inside of you by saying, I make an intention to forgive. So write down your values, and I'm going to put another thing on my Instagram stories, on my personal Instagram stories, which is a values inventory. And it literally makes you take a values inventory. Your children can do it, I think a certain age and above, and you do it. Your whole family can do it. You take that values inventory, it's free, and then you start with the values that are at the bottom, because there's some that are super easy for you. So for example, for me, wisdom and curiosity and seeking knowledge are super easy. You leave me and by myself with my books, and you come back 3 years later, I will still be here and I will be super happy. However, there are things that are on the bottom. For example, patience is not an easy one for me. So how do I practice patience? So every time I stop myself from saying something I don't want to say, I put a little check in with patience. And then I put another check-in, and I put another check-in. And the neurons that fire together, wire together. And this is how you build the muscle of patience. And so I want you to think about building spiritual muscle, building physical muscle, and building an emotional muscle during this time. And please, guys, use this experience of solitude, not isolation, and stillness to go deeper within yourself, because you will never have an experience like this again. Now, with the world having such few distractions, they've like eliminated half the work for us, actually. You've eliminated half the work, because before we were tempted by, oh, maybe I'll go do this, or maybe I'll go do that. But actually now there's very little distractions. Now it's just our phone and, you know, this kind of noise that we've created for ourselves. So eliminate the distractions. The quieter it is, the more you will hear, and the deeper you will be able to go. And that's going to be your intuition that you are going to be able to access. So now I'm going to take some questions, and I'm going to look a little bit strange because I'm actually reading on the screen for people who don't know how this works, but I'm so there's a question about how do you suggest we face our pain? That's a great question, because when you sit in stillness, pain will come up, right? All the feelings that we've sort of been running from are going to come up. How do we face that? That's a great question. And one way I would say that is I want you to sit with it, and I don't want you to feed the story. So each feeling has a story associated with it. So let's just say that one of my friends really hurt me, and years ago, and they actually, there's a feeling of pain inside of me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly open that space, and I'm going to name those feelings. I felt betrayed. I felt misunderstood. I felt misjudged. I'm going to start writing down some of these feelings, because as the Yale studies of emotions, etc., say, whatever you can name, you can tame. So if I name those feelings, I'll be able to tame those feelings. Once I've tamed those feelings, I'll be able to go deeper within that space, and I will be able to do some of that healing. I want you to see emotional pain just the way you see as physical pain. If you have a huge cut on your arm, let's just say you have a huge cut on your arm, you aren't just going to wrap it up and say, okay, let's get on with it. There's going to be an infection that spreads, and it spreads, and it spreads all over your body, and you might even have to amputate your arm at some point if there's a huge gash in your arm. No, we sometimes think that time heals pain. Time does not heal pain. Healing heals pain. Processing that pain heals pain. Finding a trusted confidant where you can talk about some of that, there is healing that happens. You actually feel like you give some of that pain away. So I want you to think about, emotional pain that you've bandaged up or you shoved down inside of you as all being there, and is probably spreading to all areas of your life, and you're probably not able to engage with new friends because the pain of the other friend is still there, and you don't want to hurt yourself, and you don't want to cause yourself any more pain. This is how we stop ourselves from actually experiencing life fully. So the way you would face your pain is first to name all the different feelings, and then to be able to release them by breathing in and out. So you might have a story that comes and you say, oh, I'm now feeling betrayed. The science shows that it stays for 90 seconds if you just allow the feeling to move through you. Remember, energy and motion, where you actually make an intention that I'm releasing the pain, and then you have another pain, and then you start to release it. But tell the story, grieve the loss, feel the sadness, and then let it go. And then move into the feeling that you actually do want, which is that of appreciation and gratitude. So you cannot release something, guys, just like you have a physical infection. We gotta unwrap it, we gotta clean it out. It's gonna hurt, but that's the only way you're gonna heal. It's the same way about emotional pain. Okay, we have some good comments about meditation. How to learn to express emotions. That's a great question. Well, first, just like you're learning every other language, emotions is a language. Most men were not taught this language because usually what happens is when a boy cries, oh, come on, toughen up, be a man. You know, boys don't cry, don't be a sissy. This is the kind of language they hear. So all of a sudden they're like, oh, don't have feelings, just be tough. That's their only feeling. Or they can be angry. Angry is okay. So boys don't learn the language of emotions. Women oftentimes do learn the language of emotions. However, not everyone has the vocabulary of emotion. They might allow themselves to feel, but then they feel like, you know, completely drifting and reacting to every moment. And so I want you to first learn the vocabulary. Just like you would learn Japanese or Chinese or whichever language, you have to first learn the language. You have to learn the rules of the emotions. And that means you're gonna learn how to calm yourself down. You can't go off feeling things until you've known how to soothe yourself, okay? So you need to know self-soothing. So what is self-soothing for me? I usually have quiet time by myself, or I might read a book, or I usually have tea with me all the time, which is very soothing for me. I have aromatherapy with me all the time, which is also very soothing for me. And so this is the way I soothe myself. So now if I want to be able to get in touch with my emotions, and then there's all sorts of storms happening inside of me, I know quickly how to soothe myself. So that's going to be very, very important as you learn the muscle of emotional resilience. Is you need to learn how to soothe yourself. Then you need to build a vocabulary of emotions. The vocabulary is more than those 3 words. It's gonna be about the nuance, you know. Instead of saying angry, you're infuriated, or you know, you're very upset, or there's layers and layers of each emotion. And like I said, I'm gonna post something about this on my stories about these emotions chart that show you the different layers of emotions. So learn the language, and then I want you to try practicing with people that you trust. And then you might say to your partner, or you might say to your best friend, and you say, listen, I'm gonna try a new thing now. And when I'm upset, I'm gonna first calm myself down, and then I'm gonna be able to express something to you. And I want you to start by saying this sentence: I feel very angry when you do this. I want you to do this instead. I feel very angry when you leave the desk a mess. Can you please clean up the mess before you leave? So I feel has to start the sentence, okay? So that's the magic formula. I feel blank when you do blank. Please do blank instead. Start with that, build the vocabulary, remember self-soothing. Let's see what other questions we have. Somebody said, this is a great question. Somebody said, can you recommend a book to improve self-discipline? No, I can't. I'm actually going to tell you that self-discipline is a muscle. Just like I can't give you a book where you can go and learn how to be physically fit, you actually got to move. I want you to move. Whatever it is that you need discipline in. So if it's about food, don't stop eating sugar altogether. Just say I'm gonna eat sugar once a week, or I'm gonna eat sugar 6 days a week if that's what you were doing 7 days a week. Whatever your goal is, move in the direction of the life you want, slowly. And I don't want you to detox from sugar altogether, or I don't want you to start praying, you know, all day long, or I don't want you to meditate for 2 hours at a time. Whatever life area you need discipline in, that's where you need to make a tiny goal and move in that direction. So for me, it was like, oh, I need to drink more water. So I was gonna say, listen, I'm gonna drink 1 bottle of water every day, and that's all I'm gonna do. So I literally carry around a bottle with me, and I don't go to bed until I've finished it. That's it. Now, obviously, I wanna be more hydrated. So small goals. So I'm not gonna give you a book, because you know what? As human beings, we've become too cerebral. We seek information, and we think by getting this information, we are going to get the life we want. Life is about doing. Every religion, every tradition, every athlete will tell you there's something about knowing, but trust me, you know enough. Now it's about doing. And hopefully you got that out of this experience, is that I want you to do more. I don't want you to read more. I want you to do more. And the Stoics will tell you the same thing. By the way, anything about Stoicism is going to be great. Actually, you know what? I will tell you a book. It's called The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. Read that book, because the Stoics had it right. You know, sometimes Stoics get a bad rap because they feel like, oh, you're emotionless, but Stoics are not emotionless. They actually have a command of their emotion. Talk about the sailor master, right? They know what to do about their emotions. And so I want you to I want you to think about yourself as being in command of your emotions, not getting rid of them, not discrediting them, not denying them, but being in command of your life. And Stoics were the masters of that. Somebody said, talk about tolerance. I'm not sure what you would like me to say, but yes, tolerance is very, very important. All of us, okay, all of us need to be more tolerant. And if you're not a tolerant person, like I said, tolerance is also a muscle. Build more tolerance. So one thing you could do, if you find yourself not being a tolerant person, I want you to go out and find someone that you are sort of not able to tolerate and build a muscle and say, I'm going to have one small interaction a day. I'm going to be curious about this person. So the opposite of, instead of tolerating, I want you to use the word accepting. Tolerating is like, this is really horrible for me, but and so how do you just accept some things? So that's just internal tolerance. But when it comes to the tolerance of people around you, I want you to say, I'm going to be really curious about this person, because every single person has a story. They have a very rich life story, and they have sadness, and they have pain, and they have love, and they have a heart, and they have a mind. And if we can just connect to that part of them and not judge them based on what we see or what we think we know about them, then we will be more tolerant. So be curious, not judgmental. I think that's it, guys. They're gonna cut me off at the 1 hour mark. It was really lovely to be with you guys. I really love this platform, and I hope I see you guys again. And if I don't see you on here, and then I will see you definitely at the Lighthouse Instagram, or my personal Instagram. And so I've written it down. I need to put the emotions chart, and I will put down the values inventory for all of you guys. Remember, guys, physical, emotional, spiritual, muscle, sailor, okay? There's the drifter, there's the sailor, and there's the master. And we want to move from being a drifter in all these areas of our life as being reactive to being a sailor who is in command. And we are going to do that step by step, in micro steps. Figure out where you are, and don't be so hard on yourself. Don't be ashamed of anything. If you don't pray at all, you know what? Start by praying one prayer. Or if you don't meditate at all, start by 10 seconds. If you don't know your emotions at all, start by learning just the vocabulary of it. Step by step by step. I promise you, you will move in the direction you want, and you will be a lot more connected to yourself. But please, guys, don't fill up your days, and don't fill up all your time. Make moments of stillness and solitude.